Hello, friends, and welcome to episode number 118 of Nostalgia Talk. I'm James, and before I introduce the guest, there's some things I just want to address. So, as I said in one of my Halloween retrospectives, which all of them are now done, by the way, you can watch all six. Um, Recently, we unfortunately had to put down my dog Waverly, named after the suburb in Nova Scotia where I'm from, and Waverly was such a good dog, very well behaved. I took her for like at least two walks a day, and when she passed, a lot of my friends said to me, "Oh, you're so good to that dog." So I want to give a big thank you to my friends and family members who have been very supportive of this very difficult time, and also a big thank you to those who have been, because I know a lot of you guys are probably listening to this. A big thank you to a lot of you guys for welcoming our new puppy. I haven't said that yet on the channel. We got a new puppy, Pip, who's right in the room with me, upset that she's not involved in the recording. We only just got her a few days ago, but already she's getting a lot of love. So, again, a big thank you to friends and family members who have been very supportive during this very emotional last few weeks of loss and also of a lot of excitement. Where not only did we get a new puppy, but I've been getting a lot of work lately, which is why I've been not really posting a lot these days. Which happens. But let's get on with the show. Joining me for this nostalgia talk is the one and only Lawrence Mirkin.
Hi there. Happy to be here.
Glad to have you here, and a big thank you to my very first ever guest. Can you believe that last week I celebrated 5 years since I started doing Nostalgia Talk? So, a big thank you to my first ever guest, Mike Peterson, for suggesting you.
Well, fantastic. First of all, congratulations on the 5 years. And then Mike, Mike and I have known one another since Fraggle Rock, and he is a wonderful human being and a great puppeteer. So,
Yeah, I took a puppeteering class from him a couple years ago. A couple years ago, feels like 5 years ago. It was 2016, 9 years ago. And now I'm actually going to be using that to teach a class in puppeteering tomorrow. And also, a big thank you to a lot of people at Muppets, some of who have been on this podcast before, who have been very supportive of the whole thing and offered some of their advice. Marty Robinson, Stephanie DeBruzzo, Mike, Bruce Lanoil, Kevin Carlson, Louise Gold, Fran Brill, even some people who we haven't heard from on this podcast yet, like Bill Beretta, Steve Whitmire, Matt Vogel. A big thank you to all of those guys. Also, previous guest Noel McNeil. So, yeah, it's been a
great people.
crazy it's been a crazy last few weeks, but I'm happy to I don't want to say back. Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years. But I'm happy to be doing this, and I'm happy to be sharing this nostalgia talk with you right now. So let's get started, Lawrence. What did you aspire to want to become? Like, were you always interested in film and TV production?
No, first of all, you can call me Larry. I like to be written as Lawrence, but call me Larry.
All right. Hi,
Um,
Larry.
my, that's right. What did I want? I grew up in a town called Cumberland, Maryland. It's about equidistance between um, uh, Pittsburgh and Washington, D.C. And no, I mean, I wanted to be, I wasn't sure what I wanted to be. I mean, I went through things like wanting to be a veterinarian. And then in high school, I was really good at math. And I wanted to be a mathematician because I had a great teacher. And I do think how the teachers you have that make huge, have huge effects on you. Uh, and I went to Yale College and I was going to be a math major. And I realized very quickly that if you're not going to be, if you're not a genius, you are going to be an accountant or you're going to be an actuary or whatever. And I got nothing against those people, but that is not what I wanted to do with my life. I always wanted to have purpose in my life. I always wanted to do something that contributed to the world, would be fulfilling to me, but would also be um, would be a profession that would try to make the world a little better place without getting kind of hoity-toity about that. Um, so in my sophomore year, I had a very sophomoric sophomore year, and we had to take a class. I am getting to the end to answer your question, but I do ramble a little bit. But
Now
here's
take your time.
okay. So we had to take a semester of either philosophy, religious studies, or something called classical civilization, which is really the Greeks and the Romans. And so there was a little known man by that time, or he was getting known in the university, named Eric Siegel, who taught in the classics program, and he was known as a really wonderful teacher. He was a guy, this is way before your time, but he ended up writing a book a few years later called Love Story, which became a movie that was a major hit in the 70s. I mean, a huge, huge hit. And it kind of undermined his academic career because it was such a populist piece. But I went to his first class. I did a class called comedy, which went from Aristophanes to Beckett. And I was so moved by that class that I immediately dropped a math course and took his tragedy course, which went from Aeschylus to Beckett. And very quickly, so I'm like 20 years old, very quickly, I decide, I don't know how, I decide I'm going to start, I want to go to drama school. I want to be involved in the arts and I'm going to start to do plays, and I'd never done anything like that. Now, I had written a lot of poetry as growing up, and so the idea of a life in the arts was, I, I hadn't quite connected the idea that you could have a profession in the arts, that those things could really work together, even though I really loved doing those things. Um, and so it's a very long story, but I ended up, as a result of that, switched my major to English, ended up going to Yale School of Drama, uh, and I wanted to run a repertory theater. That's what I was really trained to do, and uh, it was a great experience there. And then I became the literary manager of a theater in Los Angeles called the Mark Taper Forum, which did a lot of new plays. And my strength was always working with writers and uh, you know, kind of the literary sense of things. And a man came down to direct a play called The Dybbuk, which is a Jewish mysticism. And I grew up as a very assimilated Jew in this small town, and I didn't know anything about Jewish mysticism. And this man, John Hirsch, had just been named the head of CBC TV drama. And he was a brilliant man. He had started the Manitoba Theater Center. I had known about him by reputation before that. And he and I got on really well. And after he finished that show, he called me a few months later and he said that I want to come to Toronto to be a story editor at the CBC in the drama department. And he was a real artist. He was not the kind of person who in the United States then or anywhere now would ever be running a drama department in a broadcaster. And I just, in general, I try to be with the smartest people I can be with, uh, and
Always a good
uh,
plan.
always a good plan. Don't be the smartest person in the room. And and John asked me to do this. I said, "Well, John, you have to understand. I don't know anything about television. I don't know anything about Canada, but I'm coming." And I came on a 13-week contract, and that on a work visa, and then that got extended to the year, and then for a second year, and then after the second year, I had to go back to the States and apply for landed immigrant status, which I did. And then I became a story editor at the CBV drama department, then became an associate producer, then became a producer. One thing led to another, and then that led to Fraggle Rock, and which was the first thing I did for kids, the first thing I did with puppets. So it's in terms of what I wanted to, and in many ways, Fraggle Rock was really the repertory company that I wanted to have. I mean, we do, you're working with this great group of artists in a very collaborative manner. There's a vision to what you're trying to do, but you would do, a farce one week, an adventure story the next week, a little emotional story the next week. It was, it was great, and of course, those connections from Fraggle continue to this day. So,
Hmm. I actually I forgot to mention this in the introduction. I was getting kind of choked up over everything that had been going on the last few weeks, but normally when I start these shows, I always kind of list off what my guests had done over the course of their career. So just for anybody who doesn't know, because I forgot to mention it. Was the producer of Fraggle Rock and also the Jim Henson Hour, and in addition worked on Little Muppet Monsters, Labyrinth, and the animated Fraggle Rock and Muppet Babies series as a creative consultant.
correct, correct.
And I
Yes.
saw on your website, by the way, that you also were an executive story editor on some other shows I grew up with, including Max and Ruby and Monster by Mistake. Oh, I should have done a
Oh,
Monster by Mistake retrospective for Halloween because I do remember that show. But going to Fraggle Rock, do you remember the first time that you ever met Jim Henson?
oh, sure. Of
Okay.
course. Anybody who's the first time anybody meets Jim Henson, you would remember.
Yeah,
Um,
on the movie I just worked on, our production manager, I told him this to his face. He was exactly like what everybody has told me Jim Henson was like. If he's just there on set while they're filming, like you wouldn't even know that he was in charge. He's just like a guy that's there watching. But he's so nice and humble and quiet. Like,
Lovely, lovely, lovely. I mean, he was another genius that I worked with, um, um, and just the nicest. What I loved about Jim was that he wasn't perfect, and he knew he wasn't perfect, but he was just so, which made him more perfect, if you know what I mean. And so um, the story I'm going to tell you, everybody who has had a significant relationship with Jim will have a story that's specific to them, but is very similar because this is about how Jim put people together. Because I mean, everybody knows what a great director Jim was, what a great puppet maker, what a great puppet designer, how he revolutionized puppetry, all those sort of things. But he was a wonderful producer. He knew how to bring ideas together, how to bring the right people at the right time together, and uh, and how to use money wisely. Fraggle Rock, the first 12 episodes of Fraggle had been produced, but had not been broadcast yet. And it was a co-production between the CBC which is well, I don't have to explain to you because you're Canadian. When I speak to Americans, I have to explain what the CBC is. So anyhow,
yeah,
the CBC.
yesterday I was watching them tape. This hour has 22 minutes, so
Right, yeah,
which
yeah,
is a
without
CBC show.
which is a great show. Which is a great show. It was a co-production between CBC and Henson Associates, and then HBO was our U.S. broadcaster. Um, and it was the very, very first show that HBO ever made independent, like the first original show. It wasn't their first original kid show. It was their first original show, whatever. And one of my favorite comments I read some years ago was, if it weren't for Raggle Rock, there would be no Sopranos.
I never thought of that.
Yeah, so
Considering they're two different shows.
yeah, that's right. So it was the first original show. So anyhow, it was uh, they'd done these shows. And Duncan Kenworthy, who was one of the creators of the show and a wonderful producer, is from London, and he was going back to London uh, primarily to do the international co-productions. So they were looking for somebody who was local to Toronto, but they also wanted someone who was good with writers because they felt that they didn't have the scripts quite right yet. I mean, it was the beginning of a series, and this is a hugely ambitious series. So, and all of Jim's really good work takes time to figure out. I mean, just that was a process. So, anyhow, I was recommended, and I went down to meet him on a Sunday in New York at East 69th Street. And although it was a Sunday, the shop was working, and it was a beautiful, gorgeous building with all this artwork all over the place. And I went in to meet him, and Diana Birkenfield was the executive in charge of production, and so she shepherded me in to meet Jim, and he was just warm and kind and curious and all that, and we're chatting a bit about it, and I'd I I hadn't really seen anything at this point. I mean, maybe I saw one episode, I can't remember, and And I just was explaining sort of how I work. I said, I'm a real collaborative producer. I said the buck will stop with me. I mean, I will be responsible, but uh, uh, I'm really collaborative, and I'm a best idea wins kind of person. And if I always feel like if I do my job, everybody should talk about the writing, the directing, the performing. They shouldn't be talking about the producing. But if the writing, the directing, the performing aren't right, it's my fault, right? And so I sort of just talked about those kinds of things. So we're talked for about 20 minutes, and Diana comes back into the room, uh, and I realize some years later, oh, she was coming to the room to see whether she should throw me out after 20 minutes. Okay? Uh, and uh, and uh,
He was trying to
so
challenge you.
that's right. She was just sort of checking the temperature of the room. And so she said, now, Larry's a producer at the CB Salmon Department. We're just exploring things. Nobody's willing to make a commitment. He's going to make a commitment or anything. And Jim says, 20 minutes after meeting me, he says, well, I'm ready to make a commitment. And I go, blah, 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 blah. And this is the part where this is not about me. This is about Jim. And so I thought to myself, I got to be cool and be producerly. So I said, well, can I think about it for like a day or two? And sure, sure, sure. Take your time, whatever. And uh, the point is that what Jim knew, I mean, they'd done research on me. They knew that I had the skill set. What he knew that I didn't know that then was I had the personality to work with this group of people because how this whole group of people works this way. It's really about how you collaborate, how you make it the best idea winning, how you do that. There's a managerial structure to just make things efficient, but it's not about your ego. It's not about having to do it your way. It's all those things. And the show's all about collaboration. It's about our interdependence one another. So you gotta if you're gonna make that believe in those ideas, you got to make the show that way, which we did. So that's why he now again everybody Dave Goles, Jerry Jewell, everybody will have a story like that. So the only thing was that I had to go after that. Uh, the only thing was I had to go out to meet Jerry Jewell in California because if he and I didn't get on, it wasn't going to work. And uh, so I actually got more nervous about meeting Jerry than I was about meeting Jim. And and by that point, I had screened all of the shows, and I had it was right after Thanksgiving, and I had read there were about 6 scripts in development for the next season or for the next 12, and so I flew into Cambria, California, which is equidistance between San Francisco and LA, to meet Jerry and Susan, his wife, who also worked on the show, and they warmly welcomed me into their home. And to make yet another long story short, after we
That
had
was
tea
actually going to
and
be my next question about Jerry Jewell. Because I know you know this, but as many of the listeners do too, I just recently did a Jerry Jewell tribute video. And Jerry Jewell is somebody who was so heavily involved in the Muppets. Like, as I said in that tribute, about 80% of what we've seen as Muppet fans, there's a good chance, a good chunk of that was written by Jerry Jewell, but I don't think he gets a lot of love.
well, I think people don't know. I mean, I've been talking about Jerry forever because
And that
he
is and that tribute is what prompted me to want to reach you.
great. Well, I can talk forever about Jerry because um, in addition to being a wonderful friend, um, I think he was a lit. I'll tell you about meeting him in a minute, but to me, he's the literary voice of the Muppets.
Oh yeah.
I think he is the one of the great comic writers of the 20th century. But because he wrote for puppets and he wrote ostensibly for kids, people don't see it. But he also wrote with this company of performers. It's a very collaborative thing, and how you do that, how you work with improv and characters made by puppets and puppet makers and performers, and this is a very complex technical kind of job, okay, which went through his gorgeous mind and heart. And so to me, I mean, I said he laughed when I told him that. I said, "Well, yeah," I said, "You know, what you write is lunatic humanism," and he just laughed at that. He laughed most of the time, and
Most of the
so
time.
that's right. Well, we laughed all the time. I mean, I mean, he was just a joyous. I mean, someone said to me before I met him, he said, well, he looks like he looks like Santa Claus, but he doesn't really look like, didn't really look like Santa Claus.
I was
He
gonna
was
say.
Santa Claus. He was Santa Claus. Huh? Okay, and he,
Really pulling at my heartstrings here.
well, he
I
was
love
just a
that.
wonderful man. I mean, and so what happened was we had our tea and our, they made bread. He was a big bread maker. They made bread, and we went into his office to work, and he asked me, you know, he said, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, what I think." I said, "I love this show. I love the ideas. I love the characters. I love the look. I love all those sort of things." I said, "But I think in the script so far, you're just trying to do everything at once. I think you're just which is understandable because you know all these things about the characters and all that, but it needs a little more focus, and we should change. You know, I think if we made each show about one of the characters, main characters driving it, it will probably structure things a little bit better. Because I mean, this is a wonderful show, but it's also the beginning of a show. So it's just, it's the vulnerable part where you're trying to figure it all out." And I didn't know what he was going to react to that. You know, I just felt I had to tell the truth about it. And he just broke into this big smile and he said, "You are absolutely right." And we just started working then, and we worked and laughed for 27 years. You know, I mean, it was till even when we didn't work on shows together, we were always in touch. And he, so it was, and he and I just got on so well and so easily. How the show, the vision of the show, which is really the vision of the Muppets, but even more so the Fraggles, the vision of the show is, I think, if it's one person's, it's Jerry's, but it's how that collaborative nature really worked. I mean, creatively, it's really run by Jerry and Jocelyn Stevenson and me in this way that doesn't matter who gets credit for anything. But it was Jerry who
Yeah, because he was the head writer.
was the head writer, but he's
And
more than the head
like
writer.
I've seen from previous guests, Norman Stiles and Lou Berger, they were the head writers for Sesame Street. So from them, I've kind of learned the responsibility of the head writer.
Well, it depends. It depends on the particular people, and I mean, so and how they work. So, like for example, a lot of head writers rewrite people's work.
Right.
We never rewrote anybody's work. We might work with every writer on every single line, but that writer wrote that script.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's the way that Lou did it too. There's a Sesame Street documentary of him and one of the Sesame Street writers kind of going through research about one of the scripts, and so like the researchers kind of giving feedback. Maybe we do it this way, and Lou's like, I'm just picturing his Brooklyn accent every time I talk about him, but he goes, it's a little wordy. Just kind of standing
Right.
there, kind of like, how do we make this not stupid? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, there's a lot of that. But what I wanted to really get that with Jerry is that he 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 wasn't just funny. He was hilarious. But he had why I think he's such a great writer is that there's a vision about the world in what Jerry Jewell wrote and what the Muppets represent, what the Fraggles represent. It's not just funny. It's about how we are, it's about our human foibles. There's a heart to everything that is in his in what he always wrote, and there's no meanness anywhere. It's all about how we all are just, you know, uh, people trying to do the right thing most of the time, and not understanding a whole lot of other things, and it's so human. So I just think and it was just such fun to be around all the time. I mean, we would just laugh all the time.
well, talking about his spirit with those things, did you by any chance happen to see this video that came out last year to celebrate Jim Henson's birthday of Kermit, Gobo, and Oscar the Grouch together? Just talking about, oh, today's a day to celebrate creativity. And to me, because of all the stories I've heard about Jim Henson, like all three of them together, like there's no conflict in that video. It's just the three of them from these different franchises together. Um, and that inspired me to want to make a retrospective around Christmas time of Muppet Family Christmas. And
Yeah.
I said, and that's another Jerry Jewell work. And I said many times throughout this retrospective that the Muppet Show, Sesame Street, and Fraggle Rock come from different worlds and are aimed at a different audience. Sesame Street directly at the preschoolers. Fraggle Rock is a kids show. The Muppet Show is people often mistake it for being a kids show. It's a show for all ages, but really, it's meant to be like a show aimed at the adults without being extremely
Oh
inappropriate. I
yeah.
mean, the Muppet Show pilot, people don't realize this. The Muppet Show pilot was literally called Sex and Violence, but it had absolutely nothing to do with any of that. I'm telling the truth to anybody who is curious to see the Muppet Show pilot. I'm dead serious. Um, but it's parodying how you can have an adult show without being inappropriate.
Well, yeah, and also it made this is part of the revolution that Jim had for puppetry because everybody thought puppetry was for kids. And in fact, when we did Fraggle Rock, we didn't really think of it as a kid show. I mean,
Okay.
we knew that the main audience was kids, but it was it was really this old-fashioned term family, right? And
Thank you. Yeah, that's the word I was looking
that
for. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I think also the thing that really helped us was we were in the variety department of the CBC. We were not in the kids department of the CBC,
Okay.
and that I think it would have been very different if we had been in the kids department. And and the other thing is, and nobody believes me when I say this, we never had a note from the CBC or HBO. We just did the show.
Okay.
We sent the scripts out, but never got notes back. It would not have occurred to us to send a cut of the show. We just delivered the show, and that doesn't happen anymore. But we got to do what we wanted to do, and we want if we thought something wasn't right, we would redo it, and if and then there were a lot of times we had a lot of funny stuff that we thought was just not right for the world. And so we threw out an awful lot of good stuff. Um, but and that's again where that whole collaboration comes with everybody, and including obviously the other writers and the directors and the performers and the designers and all that. So it was just a spectacular experience.
Hmm. So you talked about Jerry Jewell, and there's of course another very well-known man named Jerry in the world of the Muppets who gets a lot more love than Jerry Jewell does, definitely for his insane variety of character personality and development, whether that be on Muppets or Sesame Street or Fraggle Rock or any other Henson or Muppet show. The one and only Jerry Nelson, who probably has his most major role ever on Fraggle Rock. I mean, the Count, Snuffleupagus, they were main characters on Sesame Street, but they weren't major characters. Gobo Fraggle was like this de facto leader of all the Fraggles, and as such is my favorite Fraggle. Because, and of course, because of Jerry. I mean, Jerry is still is one of my very, very favorite puppeteers. I don't know if you saw
Oh,
that documentary that with Frank Oz, Dave Goles, Jerry Nelson, Fran Brill, and Bill Barretta. It was called Muppet Guys
oh
Talking.
yeah, 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 yeah. Nice, yeah, nice,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I showed my friend the trailer. Because of me, a lot of my friends know these names. Like sometimes I don't even ask, who is that person? I say Jerry Nelson. They know who Jerry Nelson is. So I
Mm.
show them the trailer and they're showing Jerry being interviewed about the Count, and they're like, "Ah, it's your guy right there." Um, I love talking to guests about Jerry Nelson. I really do. In fact, I'm considering doing a video about Jerry Nelson like I did about Jerry Jewell and about Richard Hunt. What was Jerry Nelson like?
Well, he said a lot already. He was just an extraordinary performer. Uh, um, there's a bunch of things to say. I mean, he was Dave Gold's talked about this a little bit, but like Jerry had this ability to create a character on a cold read instantly. I mean, like
Yeah.
instantly. Okay, nobody else could do that. And
Yeah,
he
I think it
he
was Brian Henson who put it best when he said, anytime on the Muppet Show that there was a new character or a one-off, Jerry's like, I'll do it.
yeah, he was just wonderful. I mean, and he loved playing Gogo. I mean, when I interviewed him for the when we did the special features for the Fraggle Rock DVDs,
Yep, I got him
which
upstairs.
there you go. And uh, you know, and he talked about of all the things that he'd done and all the wonderful things and all the wonderful performers he worked with and all. He said that Fraggle Rock and Gobo was the height of it, and that was made, you know, and he just made that character. I mean, the thing is, what wonderful about there's so much about Jerry. And you should do a show with him, and you should see if you can get Jan Nelson, his wife, to be
Yeah,
part of it.
Jan's a friend of mine, actually.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
We talk about Jerry from time to time, or sometimes not even about Jerry. I posted on Facebook that I made a snowman once, and she commented on it.
Yeah, well, you should, she's great.
Yeah, she is.
So he I mean, the other thing that's interesting about, you know, obviously he had this great voice and this great musical ability and, you know, all those sort of things. There are a couple of other things and I didn't really appreciate this until many years later. But because Jim was making Labyrinth when we were doing Fraggle, he was not there all the time. He would come in and
Right.
out, you know, and he would direct a bit, he'd perform a couple of things, and he let us run the show. But for the performers, it was the first time that they were there um, in more senior capacities. Frank Oz was off doing movies, and so the main characters, I mean, the main performers when on Fraggle were, in terms of the senior members of the group, were Jerry Nelson and Dave Gold, and I didn't quite realize how big a deal that was for them because they felt this responsibility that they never had because Jim would always be there, or Jim and Frank would always be there. Um, so it was that was very important. I was, you know, from my point of view, I was just sort of doing the things that I would normally do, and but it was a big deal. So and they both took it very seriously. Now Jerry, um, the the thing about Jerry was that and he was very collaborative with, and he loved all the other performers and was very supportive of all the Canadian puppeteers as well. Um, but when we would every week when we'd have script meetings, we would always invite the main performer of that episode, to come to the script meeting and give their input, or you know, whatever. And um, Jerry and Richard never came. Okay, okay, never came. Okay. I mean, if we had a specific question, we would go and talk to them, whatever. And that was just that's not a criticism in the slightest. Uh, they just, in particular Jerry, you know, he was just going to do his work, okay, and was a great professional. It was never a false note in what he did. And the other thing, and Bob Stutt mentioned this a little bit in the interview you did with him, but Jerry Nelson's manipulation
Yeah.
of these great performers was the least accurate. And it did not mean a thing because he was performing a character. And he knew whether it was Gobo or was a small part or whatever, he always knew that what mattered was the performance. And he could get so much expression out of Gobo. So if you missed you know, some lip sync here or there,
Yeah, that's
not
one of
that
the
he
things
did,
about
was
his
egregious.
puppeteering
Yeah.
style is that I've noticed a lot, and I'm probably going to use that in my class, is that he tends to skip a few syllables, which I'm totally okay with because as humans, we obviously don't move our mouths on every syllable. We'd be looking like robots if we did. And so, like for the count, one, two, three. Nobody can see what I'm doing because this is an audio show, but I'm
Yeah,
using
yeah,
my
yeah.
hand to puppeteer. But I'm one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, and it just looks like Sev.
Yeah, yeah, and nobody cares, and because I mean, to be clear, in my opinion, he never missed an important syllable.
Hmm.
Like if he knew what the line was for in the scene, he knew all those sort of things. And if you're counting, if you're looking at the lip sync, unless you're a professional in doing so, if you're looking at the lip sync, then the character's not alive. Okay, I mean, so you gotta, and he just knew this in his bones because he was a great performer and a lovely guy. I mean, he used to on Fridays. He would There was a bar nearby called the Pilot Tavern, um, and he used to host what they called Frosty Fridays for the any cast or crew who want to go. I rarely went because I was exhausted from the week and worked late,
Fair, you're the
and
producer.
that's right. But I went a few times. I mean, and he was just, you know, a very caring guy. I mean, just I'll tell you another story about Jerry Nelson. Is
Okay.
when Jerry Jewell died, we all were going to go out to this memorial in Mendocino, and I was coordinating a few things, including Dennis Lee and Phil Balsam did a version of "Follow Me" that was rewritten a bit for Jerry.
My favorite Fraggle Rock song is "Follow Me."
So it's a wonderful song. It's
Yeah.
just a wonderful song, and Jerry Nelson was ill at this point. Okay,
That's right.
and
Yeah.
and so I called him. I thought, or did I write him? I think I called him, and I said, we want to do this. I said, but are you okay to do this? And he just said to me, he says, I will be there and I will sing. Okay. And, because, Jerry Jewell meant a huge amount to Jerry Nelson. And so it was just, um, he was a wonderful, wonderful man.
I heard a similar story about at the time that he was ill, he was still performing on Sesame Street because with the Muppet Show Muppets, would have to go to LA a lot, and he didn't really want to travel. He was getting the way I had heard it was that he was getting a little bit uncomfortable with traveling, and with Sesame Street, he still wanted to do it because he was living close by, but he didn't want to crouch down to puppeteer because that was uncomfortable too. So they rigged it so that Matt Vogel, who's doing a good chunk of his characters now,
Right.
um, would kind of lip sync to Jerry, and usually Jerry would be in the booth or offset recording. And I had heard that Jerry had come in. This was like maybe just a couple of months before he died. Actually, not to be morbid, but
Right.
somebody I know who was there that day was watching Jerry get all situated, and they're like, "Why are we making him do this?" And then they're like, "Okay, Jerry, action!" And he does the count just like he had never done it before, just with
Well,
the
and he went,
same
and he
energy that he
wanted,
always has.
yeah, because nobody was making him do it. He wanted to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's.
So, but yeah, I didn't know about that, but that makes total sense to me. So, yeah.
Mhm. And I can see behind you on your shelf actually the Richard Hunt biography, Funny Boy, which I have read um, twice. I attended the Center for Puppetry Arts Zoom event with you
Oh, yeah, and Max
and Rob Mills
and
and Gord
Gordy
Robertson.
Robertson.
Yeah, Gord Robertson was a previous guest on this show, and it was actually that made me want to do a celebrating Richard Hunt video because I
Oh,
thought
yeah, you should, and you try to get Max because she's great.
well, we
All
are
right.
we already did the video. It was colleagues
Oh, you
remember.
did.
I didn't do it with Max, but it was colleagues remember Richard Hunt
Right.
because I'm watching this video and I thought to myself, Richard did spend a lot of time on Muppet Show and Sesame Street. What I mean, why aren't there stories about that too? So it was individually Marty Robinson, Norman Stiles, who's the head writer for Sesame Street, and the only one of the only Muppet Show people I'm connected with, Louise Gold, and it was kind of done up like a documentary. So I did that. Yeah, I heard you talk about Richard at that live stream. But can you talk a little bit about Richard to our audience?
Sure. I mean, Richard was. I think I said. Did I say this, or did I imagine I said this? That like Jerry, he was the one he didn't come to
Right, yeah.
to the writers' room either. But what can I say? A few things. One, there is no Junior Gorg without Richard Hunt and
Yeah.
Rob Mills together. But and how they worked together was spectacular, and I just adore that character. And again, and he infused it with the humanity that Jerry Jewell put into it and the other writers. Um, um, he was interesting. I would say of the all of the performers, he was the one I was least close to, partially
Mhm.
because of you know our my work schedule, but also because he generally would just come in because he was doing Sesame Street full time,
Yeah.
and so he would come in usually
Yeah,
for a day.
I'm friends with Terry Angus. He actually doesn't live that far away from where I
Oh,
live.
give Terry my best. I have you done him? Have
Absolutely.
you interviewed him?
Interviewed him very early on. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, I remember said that. Yeah, I mean, I he's a wonderful person,
and
and he
the
would have.
and Yeah, well, I remember he had described Jerry and Richard to me when it comes to Sesame Street as the in and out puppeteers, which is funny because you mentioned Richard would usually be on Sesame Street as opposed to Fraggle Rock. And that kind of contradicts what I just said about Jerry having literally every other character on Sesame Street that Jim and Frank didn't do, but his only like big major role was Gobo Fraggle.
Yeah. No, and yeah, and Richard did a ton of Sesame, but and then he did other characters for Fraggle as well.
Oh
But
yeah.
what was going to say about him is that I think that um and Max gets into this in Funny Boy in the book a lot, but he was always a complicated guy, and I think that uh, I think that in his mind I was the producer with a capital P and so there was a kind of distance between us that I didn't try to put up. Um, we got on well. I don't want to give you any impression otherwise, but we just didn't have much of a personal connection as I did with the other performers. But uh, he was just a spectacular performer. I mean, the other story, which I'm sure you've heard, that I just loved about Richard was um, it, he would sit, particularly when he was doing Junior Gorg, the way that worked was that he had the Waldo the electronic mitt
Yep.
to do the lip sync and the eyes for Junior Gorg while Rob Mills was in the bodysuit, and he would sit at a table uh, with Cheryl Wagner, who did the voice for Magorg,
Yep,
who's
a fellow
also in your
Maritimer,
neighborhood,
Cheryl Wagner.
and yeah, she's great, and Gordy Robertson who did Pa, and uh, but Richard would just be sitting there as things were being set up, and he'd be doing the New York Times crossword puzzle, and
I know where this is going. Go
and
ahead.
okay, and he would, I mean, he just always was doing the New York Times, and then we'd get close enough, and Wayne Moss, who was the floor manager at the time before he directed, uh, would give a warning, and Richard just put down the paper, and he would just it would be action, he would be on. Now he was highly prepared. Okay, he knew what he was going to do. He knew all those sort of things. But he was just, I can do this, and now I'm going to do that. And there's a kind of performer focus, I think, that he had. Of like you got to be in the moment, you got to be in the present, and he was very good. I mean, that was the other thing about Jim Henson that I loved was as a person. If Jim was the busiest person I ever met, ever
Mhm.
worked with, and if I needed to reach him, the longest I ever had to wait was 24 hours. Okay, the longest, and that was rare. But if you were with Jim for 4 hours or 15 minutes, it was like you were the only person there. He had this focus on you, and he listened to you, and you had an exchange. And I think I've always felt that because he was such a great performer. He would be in the moment, and then that would be done, and he'd go off, and he'd go to the next person, and he'd be 100% there with the next person. So it's a gift, that to be able to do that. And I think Richard, in a different way, had that thing. I can do the New York Times, and then I'm going to do my job.
Mm.
So
I'm glad that Gord told at that webinar my favorite Richard Hunt story I've ever heard, which he actually told me when he came on this podcast, which is that Richard came to set hungover and didn't think anybody could hear him going, "Ugh, why did I pick a job where I have to be happy all the time?"
he was a complicated guy. He was
Mm.
a funny, yeah, and he was a great performer. So
Well, you were talking about Jim being the busiest person you ever met, which kind of goes into my next question, just talking about busy Muppet performers. Like you said, at the time of Fraggle Rock, Frank Oz was starting his next big career, which was movie directing, and he did some work on a lot of some of these projects that I mentioned in the second intro. Let's say.
right.
Normally, I would say, as I mentioned in the intro, but there was no intro. Um, did you have much of an interaction with Frank at all?
Not much. I mean, I always liked Frank, but uh, when we were doing Fraggle, he was, he had co-directed Dark Crystal with Jim before me, before
Mhm.
I got where I met, came became part of the group, uh, and so I would see him occasionally at meetings in New York. And I remember when Little Shop of Horrors came out, which I can't remember the date of that, but I was in New York for some meeting and he was there, and I just told him how much I loved the direction of that movie. I thought he just did a spectacular job directing that movie.
Yeah, they just had it
And
done as a stage show at my high school this year.
great. It's great. Oh yeah, you told me no, it was who told me that? It was one of yours. Did Bob told the story about that. The Bob Stutt told the story about the borrowing the Broadway stuff
Yes,
from
from
Marty
Marty.
Robinson.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And Marty, I don't really know either. I've met him a few times, but don't know him.
Okay.
Frank and I, uh, so I knew him a little bit there. He was very supportive of Fraggle Rock, but he was never on the set. Uh, and then uh, the only time we really worked together a bit was on the Jim Henson Hour when we did Miss Piggy's Hollywood and a few other things. But he was really into his directing career. And then I would occasionally see, whenever I've seen him, I've always liked him. We had a lunch together with Martin Baker probably 12 years ago or something, and
12 years, that's pretty recent.
it's pretty recent. That's pretty recent.
Wow.
And so it was in New York, and when I mean it might have been when Jerry, it might have been for the memorial for Jerry Nelson, if that's 12 years ago. I don't remember,
Yeah, he
but
passed in 2012, so that
pretty
is
close.
accurate actually.
That's pretty
Yeah.
close. Yeah. So and but I think I mean, I always liked Frank a lot, always, but we just never had much of a chance to work together.
Hmm.
And when we were doing when we did Miss Piggy's Hollywood as part of the Jim Henson Hour, I mean, basically you don't. Um, oh, I have a story. I have a story.
All right, let's hear it. From Miss Piggy's Hollywood.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. Okay, so that was part of the Jim
Grab
Henson
some
Hour, which is
napkins. This is getting juicy.
no, no. This is actually more of a story about Bill Prady. Now, Bill Prady was a writer. He's still a
Yeah,
writer,
for any of
but
our listeners who don't know, actually, this is really cool. Bill Prady started out working with Jim Henson. He wrote Muppet Classic Theater, which is one of my earliest Muppet memories. I still have the VHS tape for that. That Muppet Chip. I'm Chip. I'm the IT guy who a lot of us know from the 2015 ABC Muppet Show, but also on the Jim Henson Hour, another Gord Robertson character. That was modeled after Bill Prady. And Bill Prady ended up creating The Big Bang Theory, which is one of the most watched shows in the world.
absolutely, and that is him. That's him for sure. And so he and Jim Lewis were kind of staff writers um, for Jim during in the 80s, and um, the so they wrote Miss Piggy's Hollywood, and the show is about. And it was really a way we could get Miss Piggy into the Jim Henson Hour because Frank was in Hollywood, and so we did a whole thing where Miss Piggy was pretending she was successful in Hollywood, but she really wasn't successful in Hollywood. And she goes through a succession of stars and falls on her face until eventually she gets to Dudley Moore's house, and Dudley Moore loves, if any of the audience knows who Dudley Moore is, who was a wonderful, wonderful comic.
If you're a
Uh,
Muppet
uh,
fan, then you probably know Dudley Moore best for his appearance on The Muppet Show.
there you go. There you go. Great, great, great. And so the payoff is that he's uh, the Dudley Moore character is a huge fan of Miss Piggy, and they sing a song together at the end. But early in the show, he goes to um, she and so Gonzo's making this movie about it, making a documentary of Miss Piggy's in Hollywood. And so they go to Bob Hope's house. Now, Bob Hope was a massive star in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s.
Oh
Okay?
yeah,
Massive star.
another Muppet Show guest too.
And he loved Jim. He loved Jim. I mean, he was one of the stars that made NBC NBC. He, yeah, I can't think of who to compare him to these days, but great star. So basically, the
Jimmy
scene
Kimmel,
is
Jimmy Kimmel or
maybe
Conan O'Brien. That's probably who to compare Bob Hope to.
maybe yeah, maybe so, yeah, yeah, maybe so. Really famous, and but an actor too, and a comedian, So it's uh so anyhow, the idea is that they're going to Bob Hope's house to interview him, and they and Bob Hope used to host the Academy Awards too. So they go into his house um, because Piggy's pretending that they're good friends, and they knock on the door and they wait and they wait and they wait and they wait, and he doesn't show up, and they leave in frustration, and after a beat, Bob Hope comes out with a golf club because he's a big golfer on his side, and said a line which I cannot remember at the moment, uh, which is the tag for the scene. So Bob Hope lets us film outside his house, okay? And he has this huge complex in I can't remember the name of it. It's near Burbank, but it's not Burbank. And
It's in L.A.
so
County.
yeah. I mean, it's in the city, but it's big, complex in a house. And the front of the house is all glass where the doors are. So um, the truck, which has Peter Harris in it, the director, and the director, it's a ways away. We have to avoid all the reflections. So anyhow, we're setting up things, and I'm over there with Jim and Frank and Martin Baker and Dave Goles and Bob Hope, and we're just sort of talking things through. I mean, I'm not doing too much. I'm just happy to be there while these guys do their work. So then it's time to get back, and we had to go way back. Um, uh, so our reflections weren't anywhere near the glass, and so Bill and I are standing next to one another, and meantime, the guys are doing their work and talking through the scene, how they're going to do that and all that. And Bill says, they're looking at the script. I think the writer, they need a writer over there. We should have a writer over there. And I knew that Bill, and I love Bill. I really think he's wonderful. I I said, I know Bill, he just really wants to go to meet Bob Hope. That's what he really wants to do. Okay. And I said, here's what I think, um, Bill. I said, you got Peter Harris directing in the truck. He's directed most of the Muppet shows. I said, you've got Jim Henson and Frank Oz. Uh, I mean, you got Jim Henson right there directing the scene with the performers. You've got Dave Goles and Frank Oz doing the puppets. You've got Bob Hope saying one line. I said, I trust that. And he and he sort of burst into laughter and agreed and all that. And Bob Hope does this wonderful job, and it's a lovely little scene, But I always, I had it about him in many years. I don't see him. I'm not in touch with him that often, but I have kidded him about that. But then went on. Bill went on to this fabulous career and doing all
Mm.
this wonderful work.
Including not just Big Bang Theory, but created that Muppets ABC show that I mentioned before, the one where they're Miss Piggy's hosting the late night talk show. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah. No, I remember when he took that on. I wrote to him and I said, you understand these characters better than anybody else, and so I hope this works really well. So
Well,
I
now
think
they've
there was
got
some.
that new Muppet show. I don't know if you heard this, but the Muppet show is coming back as a Disney Plus special.
Yeah, that Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg are going to do, and I think they might really figure it out.
Yeah,
It's
well, I mean,
really
Seth Rogen's had a lot of success rebooting beloved franchises, so yeah,
he's a very funny, wonderful guy. I mean, I don't know him
yeah.
at all, but he is just great. Um, but it's interesting those classic characters. It's really hard to do it. We had difficulty in the Jim Henson Hour figuring out what to do with those classic characters. Um, Muppets Tonight was okay. This show that Bill did was okay, but they weren't really right, compared to the original, in my opinion. Um, and it's really hard because you're trying to recreate something, and that I think that the Seth Rogen thing might might just work if they're going to actually go back to the kind of vaudeville stage kind of thing, which is where the roots. I mean, the roots of the Muppet. I mean, the Muppet Show when it was on was rooted in the 1920s. I mean, and which was part of its charm and its fun and all that. But and there was something so new and fresh about puppetry that way, and all of the again craziness and the comedy that is unique to the Muppets. And then when you try to do it like when we did it on the Jim Henson Hour, I mean, we did some really wonderful stuff on the Jim Henson Hour, but we always struggled with that. How are we going to do this? We put it in a multi-channel universe with all these monitors, which people said, "What the hell are you talking about?" And and we had some new characters, and we had the old characters, and but it was really hard to do to make that stuff work well. And because other people, you have other ideas about it. The other thing that I thought was great was the Muppet Christmas Carol. I thought that was really wonderful.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that was Jerry Jewell too, but Brian Henson did a great job directing it. Um, yeah, it still could be my favorite Christmas Carol.
Hmm. I did a retrospective on Muppet Christmas Carol a couple years ago, and it brings the Muppets humor with the traditional Christmas Carol story. And I have to say, I used this word to describe Scrooge in the retrospective, and I can just bleep it out, but he was more of an asshole in that one than in any adaptation of A Christmas Carol I've ever seen. And that just shows that Michael Caine did a pretty damn good job on him. Talking about the Muppet Show characters, you were involved in Little Muppet Monsters, the
Yeah,
very
just a little bit,
short-lived show.
just a little bit. Um, I think it was happening between season 2 and 3 or 3 and 4 of Fraggle. I can't remember what. And uh, and Michael Frith was producing it, who was the head of design and just a brilliant, brilliant artist, and worked with Dr. Seuss and then with Jim.
Yeah.
Did the conceptual look for Fraggle Rock and all those puppets. Um, and so yeah, I was part of my consulting on the show for Jim, which I did for like 6 years, a whole bunch of things, a lot of stuff that never got made. And the so I just remember working on the just giving notes on scripts. Jim asked me at one point whether I would come down to produce it, and I just had some personal things I just couldn't do it at that moment,
Oh, I'm sorry.
it was fine. I mean, it was fine, but I just had to make some other decisions, and um, uh, uh, so that didn't get any far. But I did everything I could to give notes on scripts and all that. But I have um, and I remember, I kind of remember I kind of think that for whatever reason, they didn't use union writers. I don't remember why.
Okay.
And but I can't remember that.
Because Marty
Um,
Robinson remembers that Richard Hunt, who had just started doing directing, he was doing directing on Sesame Street and for Fraggle Rock and for Muppet Home Videos. Marty recalls that Richard was directing on Little Muppet Monsters.
yeah, I think that's correct. I think he's right. And I do have another funny story about Bill Prady and Jim Lewis and Michael Frith. And again, I love all these people. I just think it's really fun.
Let's hear it.
Michael Frith is brilliant. I mean, and he is one of the most articulate people you'll ever speak with. And he kind of speaks
Yeah,
in
I would love to have him on this podcast.
yeah, I don't know that he would do it or not, but you can ask him for sure. But he speaks in paragraphs. I mean, he's just brilliant. Uh, but he can be verbose, okay, and which you can kid him about. So Bill and Jim wrote a 30-page script for Little Muppet Monsters, and Michael gave them back 32 pages of notes. But you know, so anyhow, but you know, and there would be heartfelt notes and all those sort of things. But I've never really talked to Michael about you know the show and doing it because again, I was surely off to the side on the show, so I don't know what his feelings are about it, and I can't really remember how many episodes they did. I think they did
Three.
13,
Well, they did. Well, they
three.
only aired three, but
Okay, okay. So yeah, I don't have a good memory of the show exactly what happened in
hmm,
it. So
yeah.
yeah.
Little Muppet Monsters was actually a spin-off, sort of spin-off anyway, of Muppet Babies, which was way more popular at that time. And you were involved in Muppet Babies and the animated version of Fraggle Rock. Can you talk a little bit about your contributions to these shows? Because now you've got the Muppets as animated cartoons,
Right.
which really
So,
actually does kind of contradict the something I am a big believer in with the Muppets. You know, like when I tell people I'm connected to a lot of these puppeteers, they're like, "Oh, it's cool you talk to the people who do the voices."
yeah, they don't get that that's not what
Yeah,
it
and look,
is.
I get that people don't get it, but that really does get under my skin because I'm like, yeah, we just hear the voice, but we don't. That it's so magical that we don't really think about what happens underneath.
Well, and it's not about it. What's interesting about because I've done a bunch of animation over the last 7, 8 years with PBS Kids, and I like it a lot, but it's a completely different process.
Oh yeah,
How you create a character in puppeteering is unique because you have the writer, you have the puppet maker, you have the puppeteer, you know, and the director, producer, you have all that. But how that happens, and then how you create spontaneity on a set, or what a puppeteer can do, like Dave Goles, I remember on Fraggle doing where he does Boober, he had a thing with the hat, you know, with Boober's hat, and he wanted his hair to be a certain way, and he and Raleigh Cruson, who built the didn't design, built the puppet, who's one of the great puppet makers ever.
oh yeah,
Uh, she's just fantastic, and it's because Dave wanted this movement of his hair, because that when you're moving through space, it gives you a sense of you actually have a sense of character in the process, and all these little details, which when you're in animation, you know, that's a complicated thing to do and an expensive thing to do, and so you don't get all the kind of stuff which makes it live in a certain way. So you have to do other kinds of things in animation. And the other thing that people don't really get is yes, you can have, and it's been done. You can have performers do the voice and the performers do the puppeteering. It's never as good if you have the right puppeteer to do both. Um, it doesn't mean that you know there are times when you have to have uh, for all sorts of reasons you have to have someone do the puppeteering while the actual character voice, the original puppeteer comes in and do. I mean, a lot of you know the new Fraggle Rock, a lot of the the puppeteering of Dave Goles' characters is done by Frank Mesculite and Kevin Clash, and then Dave, you know, voices it. But
yeah.
he does a scratch track. He works with the performers, they talk about it beforehand, and then they do a final track. So it's a
Mhm.
different kind of process. But how did we
But
get
by
onto
by the
that?
way, were you invited to work on the new Fraggle Rock?
I did a little bit of official consulting, a little bit more of unofficial consulting.
Okay.
Um, and the first, right when they started off, they had a big, what they called a Fraggle Gaggle. And with the new head writers, um, me, Jocelyn Stevenson, Michael Frith, and Kathy Mullen, Dave Goles.
Yeah, I remember hearing about this from Donna Kimball, who does Moki now, because when she came on, I asked her, was Catherine Mullen invited to do the new show, and she said, apparently so. She doesn't know why Kathy decided not
Okay,
to do it.
that I didn't know, but
But
no,
yeah,
the
Kathy
only
Kathy was involved in that. Yeah, I knew that from her.
yeah. So I think we spent a day or two, and we just sort of, you know, the new writers, we were just trying to explain what we had done, and they were very, very respectful. And what I said and Jocelyn said was look, we always have said that everything you ever need to know is in Fraggle Rock. You just have to discover it. And our way of creating the show originally was one of discovery. And we said, yes, please be respectful. That's fine, but you have to find your own way into it. I mean, for years after we finished the show, Jerry Jewell, Jim, and I would talk maybe once a year about doing a movie, and we thought, well, we don't have a good
A
idea.
Fraggle Rock movie?
Yeah, but we would talk about it, but we would never. We just didn't go anywhere because we just didn't think we had an idea that was worth doing a movie about. And so it never happened. And I think that it was, what I like about what they've done, is they've done some different things, but it's still Fraggle Rock, and they're able to do some things because I said to them, I said, look, find your own way into this material. Okay, it's strong enough, and you'll find things. I said, and don't think about you're doing an episodic television series. Think about you're doing a feature film every week. And but they are able to do certain things that we weren't able to do. Some of it's technological because the technology is more sophisticated. But the other thing is they could do continuing stories, which we weren't able to do back then, except for a little bit of how we did the very end of the series. Um, so it's different, but only in terms of the people who were in the original people who were in the show, Dave, Karen Pearl playing Red. Um, and uh, Jocelyn was involved in. She wrote a bit and she story edited a bit, or was in the writers' room. And and then there was Frank Meshkalite, who was really important in the original show, although he was junior to Dave and Jerry and all that sort of stuff. Um, I'm missing a couple other people, but and it's it's a good group of people. That what I every sense and Jordan Lockhart's on it, who I've worked with on Hiope, and they're uh it's got the spirit. Everything I hear about the set has always been very similar to what we had. So I thought about it too. Like I did think a little bit about this. If I had been asked to do it, would I have wanted to do it? And I part of me, yes, of course, of course. But another part of me was like, you know, we did the show, very proud of what we did. Still, people are still watching it. But it's time for a new generation. We did it a certain way. They're very respectful of what we did. Uh, and I just told them, I said, look, I'm available if you ever need to ask any questions. And I would get questions from time to time. Um, and uh, the you know I I'm just happy that it's gotten to a new generation. So
When the new one came out, my friends were actually placing bets on each other. How long is it going to take for him to finish the whole season? And some of them were betting the whole weekend. Others were like, "Oh, he's going to finish it in a day."
how
It,
long did it take you?
the whole day.
right. Yeah, yeah,
I didn't think it would, but it did.
yeah.
But we were talking about like these animated shows that you've worked with,
Oh,
like
yeah, yeah,
animated
yeah.
Fraggle Rock and Muppet Babies, and also the stuff you've done afterwards, such as Max and Ruby and the PBS Kids stuff.
So, in terms of Muppet Babies, first of all, Muppet Babies, we Jerry, Jewel, and I and Jim talked a lot about this because Jerry, Jewel, it's another brilliant Jim story. Jerry was very, very worried, which I shared, that kids would their first experience of characters would be of kid character and not the original characters. And back then, animation was Saturday morning TV, and Saturday morning TV was generally considered kind of a wasteland. Okay, there was some good stuff in it, and of course, kids loved it. Okay, don't get me wrong, kids loved it, but creatively, it was worries about it. It was all just commercialized, and it was about selling cereal and all those sort of things. And but Jim said, because they were very, Saturday morning was very popular for kids. Jim said, well, I think if kids are there, maybe we should be there and give them the kind of stuff we do. And I thought, yeah, that's that's Jim, because it was a matter of, okay, this is the area. How can we get these ideas and these values that we have and the way of we do comedy this certain way? And they did it. And then they got Jeffrey Scott and Jeffrey Scott wrote all of these episodes. And he is a brilliant animator writer. I met him once on something else, and uh, he is the son of one of the Three Stooges. I don't remember which one. Okay, and he has a very good book about writing animation that I have somewhere in this pile of books. And so that was Muppet Babies, which went on, was very successful. Fragile Animation. Um, Again, I was just a consultant, and but basically the writers who came in, John Semper, and I can't remember the woman's name right now. It just went out of my head. They came up to the set. Um, it was for Marvel at that point, and they stayed on the set, and we all talked. I think they spent more time with Jerry, and then I just read some of the scripts, and they got it. I mean, they knew what they understood the show, and they and it didn't have a huge run, but they it was successful enough. And uh, but what's interesting about this world is how respectful people are. I remember 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I got there was this email from Karen Falk, who's the archivist, because they were doing some. I can't remember the name of the company. We're doing some more comic books of the Fraggles, and the writers of the comic books had
Oh,
questions about
Boom Studios, I think it's called.
Boom Studio. That's right. That's who it is. And the writers had a whole bunch of questions, particularly about the doozer sticks and the radishes and how the radishes were. And it was a wonderful question. I remember I responded and Susan Jewell responded. I think Jocelyn did, but it was like there was such care to make sure that the rules of the world were preserved, and um, which is a testament to the original conception and then how we executed that. But the original conception of the show is just great. Anyhow, in terms of animations is just different. Max and Ruby, I wrote the Bibles for Max and Ruby and Timothy Goes to School, but it was a weird time in
I love
my.
that one too.
I tell you, I love Timothy Goes. I mean, I love Max and Ruby, but I thought Timothy Goes to School was going to be the one that would hit. I didn't think Max and Ruby would hit because you got a character who doesn't talk. Uh, I love the whole idea of my subtitle for Timothy Goes to School was the soap opera of kindergarten, and I still love that show, but it only went one season. But I was doing it was a weird thing because I also do grown up stuff from time to time. So I was doing three shows in about 18 months. One was Max. I'd written, well, four really. I wrote Max and Ruby. I wrote, I mean, the Bibles. Timothy Goes to School. I was producing a puppet show called Longhouse Tales, which was about uh, it took native indigenous characters like Coyote and Raven and and a character played by Tom Jackson, um, who told these tales from the Longhouse and was trying to, but it was trying to give life to these kind of characters and show a different kind of world and these values. It was with EPN and CBC and TVO, and Frank Meshkulite was in it, and Janny Lazone, and was Gordy in it? I can't remember if Gordy was in it. Anyhow, a bunch of really good people, and I was also doing this big adult drama for Showcase. It was their first original drama called The Ride, which was urban life seen through the eyes of cab drivers, which was the last film that TV show that Al Waxman did, had Yaphet Kotto in it and all that. So I couldn't do either Max and Ruby or Timothy Goes to School because I was producing these other two shows pretty much simultaneously. Which I mean is that the last month of the Longhouse Tales, I was shooting during the day, and at night we were shooting The Ride. And so it was a really crazy, crazy time. And I I would have, I'd have calls like with TVO. This is an example. I mean, not literally this. Uh, in the morning saying, you can't say stupid in this show. And I said, no, no, I know, I can't do it. And then in the afternoon, I got a call from Showcase saying, you don't have enough sex and violence. So it was a very interesting kind of experience. I don't know. I'm off on a
Had to
tangent
use
here, but
worse words than stupid, I guess.
that's right, definitely, definitely. And then the stuff I've done I did the third season of Cat in the Hat, knows a lot about that for PBS Kids, which was turned into it's Martin Short, was turned into a Ready to Learn show. And then I consulting produced on Hero Elementary, and now I've been developing something with them and Nine Story.
Ooh, that
That
was actually just about to be my next question. If you're working on anything at the moment that you can talk about.
I can't talk about what it is. I can
Okay.
tell you that it started with Portfolio, which I did. Portfolio Entertainment was this wonderful company started by Lisa Olfman and Joy Rosen, and I helped. They did they did Groundling Marsh, if you know that show.
Yep,
That was
from
their
Gord
first show.
Robertson. I know Groundling
Yeah.
Marsh. Yep.
And so they asked me to produce that when they were first starting out, and I didn't want to produce it, but I story edited a bit and wrote a bit on it. And and I always liked them, and we tried for like 20 years to do something together. And eventually they asked me to do this, and I really wanted to work with PBS Kids, and I also have very strong feelings about educational television. So I thought, well, I better put up or shut up. And so I got to learn, had to learn a whole lot of stuff. PBS is fantastic to work with, and you have all these researchers and all this. They only care about kids. They only care about how does this program serve kids, and so I love doing that. And then did Hero Elementary, and then this other show we're doing. So Polio got bought by Nine Story. Nine Story got bought by Scholastic, but our little creative team has stayed together. Plus, we've got these great people from Nine Story on it, so it's a nice little unit. And uh, we've done 3 years of development on it, in part because of the corporate takeovers of the different or purchases of the different companies, but also because PBS is really thorough and we all really love the show. But now we have to wait to get a formal green light and all the financing has to happen. And so who knows? But I would like to do that. And then I have two other things in early development. One is a grown-up comedy set in Newfoundland.
Ooh, a
That's right.
maritime
Yeah.
show.
Yeah. We'll see if that can, we're trying to get financing for that. And then I have another show with a friend of mine in New Zealand. It's animated. It's set in Antarctica, which we're trying to get financing for that. And then I've got a few personal things I'm just trying to do. So
That's great. Well,
Yeah.
Larry, that's all I've got written here. Is there anything you want to say to wrap up?
No, I can talk. As you can tell, I can talk forever. I just hope it's useful to you and is entertaining enough for the audience. And um, I look forward to listening to not only this one, but obviously to the other ones. I have some to catch up on that you've done, and I really wish you well on all of your endeavors. You seem to have like your fingers in lots of pies, and just keep making the bakery grow.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming to the show.
Pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And to all of our listeners, make sure that you follow Nostalgia Talk on social media. Those links are in the description for updates about who's going to be coming on the show. And yeah, I'll see you next time. And since tomorrow, and the reason that I say tomorrow is because, as you guys know, I upload these on Thursdays. So since tomorrow is Halloween, have a frightening day and a frightening weekend. Peace out.